The state cannot ignore the economic situation in the world and is forced to cut budgets. President Nursultan Nazarbayev has urged Kazakhs to live within their means at the expanded meeting in Akorda. The government promises to work hard. The executive power has promptly reacted to the tasks set by the president. Solving the challenges together. Brussels hosted the summit of EU leaders. The Experience and Achievements in Medicine, geographically distant center of the World Health Organization on primary healthcare, has opened in Almaty. 1+11, a new standard of the 12-year education system, will be developed in Kazakhstan by the end of this year.
Good evening, I'm Rahim Ashakbayev, and this is Kazakhstan Weekly, where we summarize the major local and international news of the past week. Our tonight's guest is a known public figure, Ali Akhmetov. Mr. Akhmetov, I'm glad to see you.
Good evening.
Nursultan Nazarbayev has urged Kazakhs to live within one's means. The president has chaired an extended government meeting in Akorda. Participants talked about the ways to overcome the crisis with minimal financial losses for the country. The state cannot ignore the economic situation in the world and is forced to cut spending. But as the president has promised, budget cuts will not affect the social sector. Implementation of the important state programs will continue. The falling energy resources prices are likely to increase the turnover in the manufacturing industry. Let's watch the next story to learn more details.
The popular gasoline with research octane number 92 has dropped by 10 tenge on February the 11th, from 109 to 99 tenge per liter. And as reported by the President Nazarbayev, in the current economic state, prices for the government-regulated products for final consumers should decrease. Accordingly, the transportation costs should be reduced, which will impact the cost of agricultural products as well. According to the president, depreciating energy accessories and spare parts are good for other sectors, and we should use this opportunity to increase the manufacturing industry. In addition, the president tasked the National Bank to get rid of the bad loans legacy, to restore credit operations, and to solve the issue of debt restructuring mortgage. The president also instructed the National Bank to prevent high inflation and sharp currency fluctuations. Nazarbayev reassured pensioners and recipients of state benefits that all social commitments shall be met. Also, under the program, Balapan construction of kindergartens will continue along with the implementation of the Roadmap Employment 2020 program. In total, 260,000 people were employed under this program since 2011 to 2014. Another 120,000 Kazakhs were trained. This year, as part of the industrialization map, over 7,500 permanent jobs will be created. The construction of roads under the Joly program will continue. About 500 billion tenge will be allocated for this purpose from the National Fund in the next 2 years. At the same time, Nazarbayev suggested that government officials and staff of national companies show an example of modesty and austerity. In particular, he asked to consider reducing spending on public events and anniversaries at all levels, including the administration of the president and city administrations. The government has been tasked to cut the Republican budget for up to 700 billion tenge, or by 10%. The holdings that control the national companies, such as the Samruk-Kazyna, Baytrek and Kazagro, have to undertake the same measures. In general, budget cuts in the ministries, holdings, and local authorities will total $4 billion. The president urged citizens to be patriotic and buy domestic products, and has proposed to launch a campaign named Made in Kazakhstan. The engineering and manufacturing of export products will be supported, the infrastructure of small and medium-sized businesses will be created, and state support for the agricultural sector will be increased. In order to realize all these measures, Nursultan Nazarbayev had instructed to make amendments in the program Joly within 1 month, and to provide reserve for urgent operational measures in the amount of 250 billion tenge. When the oil price was more than $100 per barrel, products and metals were in good demand. But now we have to live within our means, and we need to overcome this period. I know that there are proposals to reduce social spending. It could be supported, but if it does not concern ordinary people. For example, our spending to support banks made up 500 billion tenge, for the Winter Universiade 100 billion tenge. The second phase of the metro construction requires 227 billion tenge. All these projects can wait, and let's put them on hold. The most important thing is not to make our people, our citizens, suffer.
Mr. Akhmetov, we can see that in many countries, even in the developing countries, they cut spendings facing the crisis. So why does Kazakhstan do the other way?
There are a number of reasons. Of course, first of all, we should underline that the whole world, I mean the world economy, is undergoing a sort of crisis. And Kazakhstan is not exclusion, and Kazakhstan is also taking measures against this crisis. And at the extended government meeting which was held in Akorda, the president underlined that the citizens of Kazakhstan should live within their means. Of course, by this he meant that when the price of oil was, for example, $100 per barrel, it was another situation. And now the fall of oil price and affected the whole economy, because Kazakhstan is one of the oil producing and the gas producing countries, and the export is has been decreased, and because of this tax revenues and other allowances have decreased. And taking into consideration all this international situation, economic situation, very important measures have been taken. But at the same time, the president has underlined that the social obligation of the state will be retained, and the social sector will not be affected by the, for example, the shortage of expenses. This is a good sign. Why so? For example, in other countries, in many other countries, for example, these kind of measures were not taken because austerity measures are still very strong. But here in Kazakhstan, the situation is a bit different because we have still growth of GDP. Let's say last year the growth was about 4% or 4.5%, but this year, for example, the last year, for example, it was 1.5. That means still our GDP has a sort of growth. That's why, taking into consideration of this growth, the social sector, the allowances, pensions, and salaries will not be decreased. This is a good sign. On the other hand, the last address of the president to the people, which is titled as Nursultan, the path to future, the main target is to develop infrastructural projects. That means roads and, for example, industrial projects and social projects, for example, building of schools, kindergartens, and so on and so forth. And these projects will continue. But some other projects, costly projects, which can wait for a while, they can be stopped without any damage to the economy of Kazakhstan. Because, as the President has underlined several times, that recession or crisis will not continue forever. For example, this crisis might continue 2 or 3 years, and things will improve. And then those stopped programs will be restarted again. I think this is a very, we should qualify it as very logical measures. That's why I think both the President and the government and the ministers are taking measures, austerity measures. These austerity measures sound very, very strange because these measures are very strong in the European countries, especially in Greece, for example, in Portugal and other countries like Italy. But we should also use this term, austerity. Austerity measures should be taken. As the President said, every citizen should live within his or her own means for a while. Later, things will improve.
The executive power has responded promptly to the problems voiced by the president. Almost immediately after the extended meeting in Akorda, the Prime Minister held a meeting of the cabinet. The media wasn't given the details, only that Prime Minister Karim Masimov urged ministers to work with their sleeves rolled up. Let's find out what the members of the government and the chairman of the National Bank think about the instructions of the president, what priorities, actions they intend to take, and how they intend to save the budget funds.
Сегодня глава государства поставил задачу.
Today, the president set the task of optimizing a number of areas in expenditures totaling around 700 billion tenge. We are talking about the suspension of all new investment projects that amount to about 150 billion tenge of the state budget. In addition, these are projects of local budgets and projects that are currently funded through the earmarked transfers of the national budget. Administrative costs of government agencies will be reduced by approximately 100 billion tenge. We are talking about the cost of various analytical studies, consulting services, events that can wait until the following years.
Следующих лет. В главе государства были внесены несколько сценариев.
Several scenarios of the development have been considered by the head of state. The average price of $50 per barrel was taken as the basis. The growth of Kazakhstan's economy in 2015 is expected to reach 1.5%. These figures are much lower compared to the previous years, but the trend is quite positive for the economy of Kazakhstan compared with the fall of the Russian economy of 4.5%, depending on oil prices.
Для казахстанской экономики.
Modernization of existing oil refineries is going according to the schedule. The president gave a specific task to start the development of the project for the construction of the 4th oil refinery. We are working on it now. Our task this year in the field of oil is not to allow the excitement that was in the summer when there was a shortage of oil products.
Главой государства принято решение об увеличении мер.
Head of state decided to increase the measures of state support of agriculture. The total amount of funds allocated reaches 40 billion tenge. About 25 billion tenge out of those will be allocated to support the livestock. This will increase the subsidies in livestock by 50%. This is subsidizing of feed under the program of measures for productivity, and this will allow agricultural producers to have a steady agricultural year. The main task is to provide jobs and to prevent staff cuts in large companies. This is a top priority. Also, the issue of social responsibility won't be left without attention.
Национальный банк 2015.
In 2015, the National Bank intends to prevent sharp exchange rate fluctuations of the tenge. There is an appropriate margin of security. The National Bank and the government was also tasked to provide the necessary liquidity of tenge for the real sector and the second-tier banks. We are working together with the government on the plan. We are also working on de-dollarization of our economy. Should there be changes in the external capital markets, then accordingly we won't allow the simultaneous shock and devaluation. We will work within the flexible exchange rate changes.
Изменение обменного курса.
So, Mr. Akhmetov, President underlined that the main anti-crisis measure is a Nursultan program. Let's talk in more details about this program.
As you have just mentioned that after the extended government meeting, the Prime Minister again talked with the economic and energy ministers and the agricultural minister of Kazakhstan, and also Minister of Healthcare, and everybody, all the ministers have underlined that in spite of the fact that all those austerity measures, in spite of those measures, those sectors will develop. For example, on the other hand, we should underline that during these years, the last year, for example, beginning with the last year, the oil price, gasoline has become cheaper. For example, A92, for example, the price of this gasoline has been decreased by 10 rubles, no, 10 tenge. That means if gasoline is cheap, everything is cheap. As you remember, during the last years, for example, when the price of gasoline was higher, it brought to the growth of prices everywhere, in all the sectors. But now, the price of gasoline has become a little bit cheaper, and it will affect the whole economy. This is a sort of I would say, positive measure. And for example, from the interviews of the ministers, we found out that especially the president of National Bank, he has underlined that some measures will be taken, but sharp, for example, changes in exchange rate, for example, will not happen, because soft fluctuation and soft, for example, growth might happen, but devaluation or sharp devaluation of tenge will not happen. This is a good sign. On the other hand, the president underlined one more fact, that the deposits of the citizens of Kazakhstan are guaranteed, for example, almost by 98%. If there is necessity, this guarantee will grow, even will be bigger. And I think even the president underlined that there is no crisis in Kazakhstan, because taking into consideration all the sectors, economic sectors of Kazakhstan, the situation in Kazakhstan is much better compared, for example, to other economies of the world. From this point, I think we must understand, and the citizens of Kazakhstan should also understand, that all these measures are temporary measures, and the crisis will be overcome, and the situation will improve. But we must be, everybody must be ready for this, for example, austerity measures, because Kazakhstan is also forced to do so, because every country of the world is doing the same, you see, because to get out of the crisis is not an easy thing, because austerity measures, only austerity measures will save the economy. Austerity measures will save the financial situation of every country, including Kazakhstan.
The capital of Belgium hosted an informal EU summit last week. The meeting began a few hours later than scheduled. The delay was caused by a good reason. The key participants of the summit, the German Chancellor and the French President, arrived in Brussels from the Belarusian capital, where the Norman Quartet representatives discussed the situation in eastern Ukraine for more than 16 hours the day before.
The summit was held in an informal manner. It was attended by leaders of 28 countries of the European Union. Such meetings are held at least twice a year. The outcome of the negotiations on Ukraine's situation was high on the agenda. In Minsk, the parties have managed to agree on the introduction of a ceasefire in the conflict zone from midnight on February 15th and the withdrawal of heavy weapons. This refers to the withdrawal of the Ukrainian troops from the current line of contact and the line marked on September 19th in Minsk Agreement for Donbass rebels. In addition, parties have reached an agreement on implementation of the previously adopted law on the special statuses of territories of Donetsk and Lugansk and a whole range of measures of economic and humanitarian nature aimed at smoothing the situation in the region. The participants of the EU summit have conceived the results of Minsk talks with cautious optimism. The French President, François Hollande, called the results of the meeting a serious hope of resolving the situation in Ukraine and a great relief for Europe, but noted that there is still work to implement the agreements reached. Meanwhile, during the summit, progress has been noted in the dispute of huge external debt of Greece. The new Prime Minister of this country, Alexis Tsipras, said that the dialogue at the technical level continues. Decision-making is expected on Monday. We didn't cover the full 9 yards, but we did take some important steps, Tsipras said. Recall that the total public debt of Greece amounts to more than 320 billion euros, or about 174% of their GDP. Experts will examine how the current aid program for Athens is capable with the plans of the new government of Greece in the economic sphere. The basis for compromise was laid by the German Chancellor Angela Merkel. She pointed out that the strength of Europe lies in the ability to compromise, adding that Germany is also ready for it. The outcome of the summit was sign of a joint declaration of combating terrorism. EU leaders have decided to amend the Schengen Borders Code to strengthen the fight against terrorism. It refers to the systematic verification of persons having the right of free crossing of the external borders of the Schengen area on counter-terrorism databases.
Mr. Akhmetov, what do you think, to what extent is the EU summit platform is effective in solving the problems of the EU?
Yes, as you have just said, European Union summits take place at least twice a year. And this informal summit was also held in the capital of Belgium, in Brussels. And as you have said, that it started with delay because of the as you have a day before, for example, Francois Hollande and Angela Merkel and Poroshenko participated in the Minsk meeting, because this Minsk meeting was very difficult meeting, I would say. It lasted for 16 hours, and all these participants were exhausted and tired. But in spite of the fact that they arrived, but they took a small, I think, rest. And besides that, they didn't start the summit just from the start, because all of them talked to the European Parliament chairman and the presidents, European Commission, European Council. First of all, they had another meeting before the summit. And it was logical, I think. But we must underline one fact. For the first time during this, if we take the last 2 years, European Union summit didn't take any, for example, sanctions against Russia. This is a good sign. I think it is because of the results of the Minsk meeting. And I think just tomorrow, on the 15th, from the midnight, for example, ceasefire will start.
But now it's became more intensive.
More intense because as they have all of them have signed this document, I think. And the so-called, for example, I mean the eastern Ukraine, they are ready for the ceasefire. But the war is still going on. Let's wait for a while, and we'll see whether these decisions will be fulfilled or they will be broken.
Kazakhstan has become the center of the World Health Organization, WHO, on primary health care. A geographically distant WHO office has been opened in Almaty. Secretary of State of the Republic of Kazakhstan, Gulshara Abdikalikova, met the director of WHO Regional Office for Europe, Nursultan Nazarbayev, in Akorda. According to Abdikalikova, the opening of the WHO office in Almaty is symbolic, as it was in Almaty when WHO UNICEF declaration on primary health care was adopted in 1978.
The new WHO center in Almaty will coordinate the workflow of 53 European and Asian countries on the development of primary healthcare services and allow adapt best international medical practices in Kazakhstan and the European regions as a whole. The Secretary of State has emphasized that the opening of the WHO office in Kazakhstan is a testament to the high evaluation of country's achievements in health and in particular in the development of primary healthcare. For many years, Kazakhstan has been actively cooperating with the World Health Organization. Most important areas are the fight against communicable and non-communicable diseases, especially with infantile paralysis and tuberculosis. Over past years, maternal and infant mortality rates, life expectancy, and rates of HIV and AIDS have significantly dropped. Since 2009, maternal mortality rate has dropped by 3 times, as infant rate by more than 1.5 times. The new WHO center in Almaty will be the only UN office in the country. As the UN resident coordinator in Kazakhstan, Stephen Tull, noted, more than a dozen United Nations agencies have expressed interest in opening branches of its central offices in Almaty. According to him, Office of Representatives of the United Nations Environment Program may become one of such offices.
This center will promote primary health care in the whole of the European region, in the 53 countries. It will develop the policies, the technical programs, and do a lot of training and capacity building. There is full access to everybody in the Kazakh population to primary health care, to prevention and health promotion. So we can say that the WHO target on universal health coverage has been achieved in your country.
At present, we are developing the basis for the introduction of the Fund of Compulsory Social Health Insurance, which will be enacted in 2017. This implies a competitive healthcare system with a highly developed primary healthcare, which will serve as the basis for the entire healthcare system. It is the high responsibility of every citizen of Kazakhstan for own health.
So, Mr. Akhmetov, what do you think caused the interest of international organizations like WHO to open the offices in our country?
I would explain it this way. Kazakhstan is a member of World Health Organization, and not only an ordinary member, but one of the active members. And that's why, if, for example, the distant office of World Health Organization will be installed in Almaty, this is a good sign. It underlines the cooperation between Kazakhstan and this organization is getting improved from year to year, because we know that now mortality among mothers and infantile mortality is decreased, and such diseases as tuberculosis and very many other diseases also have been tackled for the last years, and that's why I think World Health Organization has made a decision to install one of its offices in Almaty. That means this office will control or coordinate the workflow not only of Kazakhstan but also more than 50 countries of Europe and Asia. You see, because again we must underline that Kazakhstan is a bridge between Asia and Europe, and it is the right place to install, to create this kind of office. And on the other hand, it is acknowledged, this organization has acknowledged Kazakhstan as one of the developed countries, already developed countries in the primary healthcare area. That's why they have made this kind of decision. I think we must be proud of this.
The new standard of the 12-year education program will be developed in Kazakhstan until the end of 2015, as was announced at the expanded board of the Ministry of Education and Science. According to the Minister Aslan Sarinjipov, the preschool training program is currently active in Kazakhstan. It involves 95% of all children in the country aged 6. The new standard of education will be in the 1+11 formula. That is, besides the existing program in Kazakhstan, which comprises 11 years of secondary education, a 1 year of preschool preparation will be added.
The education minister has stressed that despite the negative impact of external economic factors, the modernization of the education system will continue. In particular, a new model of awarding grants will be introduced. It will take into account not only the level of knowledge of the students, but also their social status. Supervisory boards and 21 state universities will be created as well. Meanwhile, Sarinjipov has dispelled expectations concerning the cuts of grants under the scholarship program Bolashak. However, according to the minister, from now on, the scholarship holders will undertake language courses in Kazakhstan, thus saving up to 2 billion tenge per year. At the end of the meeting, Deputy Prime Minister Berdibek Saparbayev has outlined a number of tasks. In particular, it is necessary to pay attention to the preparation of high-quality textbooks, challenges of dual education, provision of textbooks, and youth employment. According to him, President's address to the nation, the Joly program, and the instructions of the President outlined during the recent government meeting shall serve as a practical guide for action. We have carried out almost all plans at all levels of education, including the plans of the Ministry of Education and Science in the past year. Today, preschool enrollment has exceeded 80%. We are ahead of the plan. In secondary education, we have updated the standard. Also, we have developed a new curricula for elementary and middle school and built more than 120 new schools. Furthermore, we reduced the number of emergency and 3-shift schools. The next year, we plan to build more than 110 schools. The development of a dual system of education will continue. In higher education, we have a new project of staff training for industrialization based on 10 universities. Since September, these institutions will begin teaching under the updated programs.
So, Mr. Akhmetov, Kazakhstanis have been discussing the 12-year education system of secondary schools of the country for several years. What is your opinion about this proposal?
Yes, to implement this kind of reform is not an easy thing. If I'm not mistaken, 3 ministers, two previous ministers and this new minister, 3 ministers have been discussing this implementation of preschool program in Kazakhstan, that is 1+12. And at last, at the last meeting of the extended meeting of the Ministry of Education, the minister underlined that about 95% of preschool children, I mean 6-year-old children, are enrolled in the pre-education. This is a good figure, I think. And at last, Kazakhstan has reached this level. And of course, discussions went on, and at last it's high time to implement this program into the schools of Kazakhstan, because a lot of preparations have been made. By the way, Nazarbayev, the Prime Minister who attended the extended meeting of the Ministry of Education, has criticized the ministry in several areas. For example, shortage of textbooks and so on and so forth. And on the other hand, the President, the Minister of Education has promised that everything, all the shortcomings will be eliminated and everything will be okay. And I think it's high time already, because as you have just said, it has been discussed for several years, and now there is no time to wait.
Let's make a decision.
Let's implement this program. Let's wait for the results.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Akhmetov, for being with us tonight. Hope to see you again next week.
Thank you.
Finally, here is a brief review of the events of the coming week. The OSCE Parliamentary Assembly winter session will start in Vienna on Wednesday, February 18. On the same day, Qatar will host the World Innovation Summit for the Health. We will discuss this and other important events in our next program. Thank you for watching. Best of luck and goodbye.